Thank you very much for being with us. Volodymyr Zelensky has said it's absurd, NATO's delay in giving a time frame for membership for his country. In Vilnius, with his wife, Ukraine's president raised a flag that he brought from the Bakhmut front. He spoke in reaction to the word from the NATO summit where his country's membership was part of the conversation, but within the parameters of the right conditions being met.
When we applied for membership of NATO, we spoke frankly. De facto, Ukraine is already in the alliance. Our weapons are the weapons of the alliance. Our values are what the alliance believes in, and our defense is precisely the element of the European formula that makes it united, free, and at peace.
There were positives for Zelensky, though. The French President Emmanuel Macron announced longer-range ground-to-air missiles. Let's listen to Macron.
Et puis, compte tenu de la situation,
Given the situation and the counteroffensive being conducted by Ukraine, I've decided to increase deliveries of arms and equipment and to provide the Ukrainians with deep strike capabilities while maintaining the clarity and coherence of our doctrine, in other words, enabling Ukraine to defend its territory. We have therefore decided to deliver new deep strike missiles to Ukraine.
The President of France, Emmanuel Macron, there. Also, an 11-country training coalition on F16 jets has been agreed for Ukraine, but that issue of NATO membership remains, as it has since the very start of Russia's invasion, a sticking point. Let's bring in for some wider analysis Natia Seskuria, who's Associate Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Natia, good evening to you. NATO membership is and always has been a very key request, but it's not in the picture. Do you understand why Zelensky says it's absurd?
Yes, I do understand. Good evening. Thank you for having me, first of all. I do understand why Zelensky is so disappointed. The Ukrainian side has been very disappointed by hearing the final result of today's summit. And it is fair enough, to be honest, because Ukraine has been striving for NATO membership for a long time. They have been fighting this brutal war against Russia. They have been using NATO weapons. They have demonstrated that they are highly capable, adaptable to use NATO weapons. But at the same time, a NATO membership for some time for Ukraine has remained as an elephant in the room. And it doesn't seem like the allies are in agreement when it comes to the concrete steps in terms of offering Ukraine a concrete membership path. Of course, it has been announced that the membership action plan will no longer be one of the steps towards the actual eventual membership for Ukraine. But at the same time, it is very unclear, and the summit communique doesn't really make much clarity when it comes to what will be next for Ukraine and what sort of timelines we are talking about.
Can I ask you now, Natia, about these longer-range missiles being promised by France? How do you think this will change matters on the ground?
It is very important. France's support is very important alongside the European support in general. And of course, we have been looking at the Ukrainian counteroffensive for some time. They have been preparing for this offensive for a while. And it is very important to demonstrate that even though the membership doesn't seem like will happen anytime soon, the NATO members, the European Union, stands very clearly with Ukraine in terms of providing them long-range missiles and military supports that they need, and they would need it for sure, because as we see, Russia is in this war in a long-term perspective. And I think actually what today's one of the most disappointing points, I believe, from today's events is that Putin does not really believe in any sort of promises, verbal promises. He only believes in, he only fears in the demonstration of power. And in that sense, this is a demonstration to him that Ukraine's NATO membership is still up in the air. And even though a lot of leaders today, and I have been attending the forum today, and I've heard a lot of leaders claiming that there is no other way for Ukraine rather than the eventual NATO membership. But what Ukraine needs now is is all the possible measures and all the possible help to actually defeat Russia on the battlefield, because otherwise I do not really believe that Putin will be deterred in any other way.
You mentioned, of course, that membership of NATO up in the air. Talking of up in the air, Zelensky asking for jets, firepower in the air since the invasion was launched in February last year, and now this F16 coalition. How do you see that changing matters?
It is very important. It is, of course, it has been in the wish list for a long time, and it will have a very significant impact on the Ukrainian performance. And I think the unity in that sense would be crucial in terms of helping Ukraine and in terms of enabling Ukraine to make sure that all the gaps are being closed when it comes to their capability gaps. So in that sense, I think that is a very important decision for sure. And one of the positive sides that we can discuss from today's events is that there has been a lot of promises made when it comes to the long-term military support towards Ukraine, and that I think is extremely important. And in that sense, NATO allies have demonstrated that they have been standing and they have been willing to stand alongside Ukraine, even though there has been, of course, some differences, but overall, I think NATO has been quite united when it comes to the military support.
A very positive message, as you say. Can I ask about this idea of cluster munitions being provided? This, of course, pledged by the United States. You're saying that if these things are used, they'll reply with a similar measure. Are we entering a more serious escalation phase of the counteroffensive, do you think?
Yes, definitely. I think we are indeed entering a more serious phase, and we already see that Ukrainian counteroffensive has been underway. Of course, this issue has been also one of the most divisive issues because of a lot of countries actually having a quite firm stance with regards to this. But at the same time, it is important to actually look at the situation on the battlefield. And on the battlefield, we see that Russia has no limits. Russia is willing to use any capabilities, any weapons that they have to make sure that they advance on the battlefield. So it is very important to take that into consideration and to make sure that Ukraine has enough help to achieve victory on the battlefield.
Very briefly, final question, Natia. In some ways you've covered this, but I'm trying to get this reinforced. Do you think Ukraine will ever actually get it into NATO? What's your reading of the situation?
I hope so, and I do believe that the premise of the Bucharest summit in 2008 with regards to Georgia and Ukraine was a mistake. It demonstrated a weakness. We can argue that these two countries were not ready in terms of maybe capabilities and defense readiness to join NATO at that time. But 15 years have passed. We have seen wars in Georgia, 2 wars fought in Ukraine, and in that sense, it is very clear that there needs to be some serious security guarantees. Otherwise, Russia is willing to cross any limits, cross any red lines, and to carry on this war effort further and further. And Ukraine will not be the final stop for Russia if they will be able to achieve any success there. So in that sense, NATO security guarantees is absolutely crucial for Ukraine in order for them to survive, really, because this is a matter of survival.
Natia Seskaria from the Royal United Services Institute, thank you very much indeed for your time and for sharing your analysis of the situation with us here in France 24. Thank you very much indeed. Natia Seskaria.